Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nazir daf Nun Hey. Getting close to the end of the Masechet, Bezrat Hashem, next week on Thursday night, we will be, or Thursday night in Israel, Thursday wherever you are, maybe Friday morning for you, we will be finishing Masechet Nazir. We'll have our Siyum with Rabbanit Leibowitz speaking about hair, with Sylvie Gilad, speaking about her from the learner's perspective. And we'll finish this Masechet and move on to Sota. I did mention once before, I'll mention it again, the Pesach Shiurim. I'm going to be away possibly a little before Pesach and through Pesach till the day after Pesach. So all those Shiurim are being recorded in advance. If you have any dedications and they come in after, they'll just go in the printed on the website and on the WhatsApp group, but they won't be announced. And there won't be Zoom for all of those days. Okay, so I'll update exactly on which days, but definitely throughout Pesach and the Thursday, the day after Pesach, which might be Pesach for some of you still in Chutz La'aretz. Okay, any other announcements? So please register for the Siyum, and if you're in Israel, there's Siyumim going on. Wednesday night, there's one that'll be on Zoom in Ranana with Rabbanit Shimoni, connecting between Nazir and Pesach. And there'll be Siyumim in other places, other days. So you can look on the Hebrew side of the website, the registration for the Zoom, the registration for all the Hebrew Siyumim is there. Okay, back to today's daf. So today's daf is sponsored by Rochelle Chefetz to commemorate the yurtzeit of her aunt, Rose Rubelo, Rachalea Bat Rav Moshe and Sipora Mashbaum. Yehi Zichra Baruch. Today's daf. We are going to I'm just going to refresh your memory about the Mishna. The Mishna listed. We're in the second Mishna of the set of Mishnayot, where we're now comparing instead of the typical Tum'ah of the previous Mishnah, where it cancels all the previous days of Nizirut and you start all over again. And you have to go through not only the 7-day Tahara process, purifying, but you also, if you became impure to a dead person in those situations, you'll need also to bring sacrifices and shave and then start all over again from the beginning. In this Mishnah, and according to the Rambam, everything in this Mishnah is only rabbinic. According to Tosfot, maybe there's one minor difference, but something that is d'oraita, but most of these are Tumah, rabbinic Tumah. And the laws are as follows. Doesn't cancel the previous days, but you do stop. Okay? You stop counting, and then you continue the count when you're finished purifying yourself. So one of the things on the list, we're going to have two basic sugyot today. One we're going to completely finish, which is leftover from yesterday, about the Tumah of Eretz Ha'amim. It's a very interesting rabbinic ordinance that the rabbis said in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel, everything is impure. We talked about two possibilities as to why. We'll get back to that in 1 minute. And then we're going to have a second sugya, which we're going to start. We're going to kind of, we'll complete what we were up to, but the sugya is going to continue into tomorrow's daf. And that's going to be about the leper. So we'll start off with where we were up to. We had a question that we thought we could answer from our Mishnah about Tumah in other places outside of Israel. Did the rabbis say this is all going to be considered tameh because they were worried that there were graves dug up of Jewish, bones might be around, a body might be around, or part of a body that might make you impure if you just walk over it or touch it? And the second option was, no, we're not worried about that, right? Because what are the chances? And, it's not so likely, but we are worried that the rabbis just didn't want you to leave Israel. So they basically said, all of outside of Israel is impure in a way to prevent people from leaving Israel. That's called Mishum Avira. The first one is called Mishum Gusha. Gush is like a piece of dirt, or a piece of the ground. So now the Gemara is going to suggest, so we tried to prove it from our Mishnah, but we were unsuccessful because the Mishnah seemed to be treating all these cases as if it's real impurity, which made us think that it was Mishum Gusha because of the earth, and the earth carries impurity, right? And that would be the issue because the other one, Mishum Avira, has nothing to do with really impurity. We just call it impurity, but it's not real impurity that you would need a process of cleansing from it. It's just the rabbis didn't want you going there. But they rejected that because they said maybe those words, purify yourself on day 3 and 7, are only relevant to the majority of the cases in the Mishnah, but perhaps not this one. Now the Gemara wants to suggest, Lema Kitanai, perhaps the machloket, whether, in other words, we're back to this question, not relating to our Mishnah per se, but is relating to the case in our Mishnah, Eretz Ha'amim, is that Mishum Gusha, Mishum Avira? Perhaps that's a machloket Tanaim. I'm going to pull up the study guide right now because that'll help you to understand the structure of the page, even though it's in Hebrew, but it should help you somewhat. So we basically have this machloket. Rebbe says mitameh, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda says mitaher. We're going to see it right now. And nichnas le'eretz ha'amim. Sorry, I went to the chart too quickly. Let me read the case. Hanichnas le'eretz ha'amim b'shida teva u'migdal. If you go into Eretz ha'amim in a box, some sort of box, a chest, some sort of, different kinds of chests. Basically, these words are different words for chests. You get carried in. Not the most typical case, which we'll get back to that in a few minutes. But right now, we're just saying you get carried into Chutz La'aretz, into some other country, not Israel, in this box. What's unique about this box? Well, if you would be, let's say, walk over a grave, be passed over a grave in this box, the box protects you from tumah. It's called Chotzes B'pnei HaTumah. So whereas tumah, kind of, let's say there's a dead body in the ground, the tumah rises, and unless it's blocked by something, so if it's blocked by this Shida Teva U'Migdal, then basically you won't become impure because you're in that box, and the box protects you from the impurity going in. So Rebbe mitameh, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda mitaher. Rebbe says you're tameh. Why? Because Rebbe says it's mishum avira. This has nothing, or let's start with Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. It's a little easier to explain. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda is mitaher. He says you're totally pure. Why? Because the box protects you from any impurity getting in. Obviously, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda is concerned about actual impurity in the ground that might come up and get you impure. That would be mishum gusha because of the earth. Rebbe says, no, you're tameh. Now, how could you possibly be tameh? Because this gzeira this ordinance has nothing to do with actual real tumah. It's because the rabbi said, don't go into outside of Israel. They don't care whether you go in a box or you go in anyway. It doesn't make a difference. That's what the whole thing means, mishum avira. Mishum avira means that regarding the airspace, right? You become impure just by going into the airspace. It doesn't matter how you went in. It doesn't matter, right, whether you're in a box or you're not in a box. So it seems like this is a great suggestion. This machloket is exactly avira or gusha. Perfect. But the Gemara is going to reject it and suggest 3 alternative ways of understanding this machloket. According to the way we're going to read the Gemara, the structure is very simple. They're going to bring an explanation, and it's either going to be they all agree it's mishum gusha or they all agree it's mishum avira, and all or both. And then they're going to explain what the machloket is, and then they're going to bring a braita. Okay, now in the second 2 cases, which is like the third and fourth explanation of this, because the first explanation was it's a machloket mishum avira mishum gusha, and then we're going to have 3 alternative explanations. So the last 2 cases, the braita is going to be brought to prove this explanation and give us a proof that this is a good way to explain it. In the first attempt to reinterpret this machloket, it's actually going to be used as a rejection and say, oh, but this braita shows otherwise, okay? And it's a rejection. I will point out that there's an alternative way to read this sugya. So the way I'm going to read this sugya is like this. We first suggested it's a machloket tanaim. That's section 1. Then we're going to suggest a different explanation, but we're going to reject that explanation. Then we're going to suggest a third way to read it, and we're going to prove that this is a good explanation. And then we're going to bring a fourth explanation and prove that it's a good explanation also. There are some people who think, and they read the sugya a little bit differently, or a lot differently than we're going to read it, that the second explanation, which is the one we're going to start with right now, right, the alternative for this machloket tanaim, is actually proven by the braita. So it's a bit of like an opposite, that the braita doesn't reject it, it actually proves it. We're not going to read the Mishna that way, the Gemara that way, but I will tell you that there's 2 different ways to read this. Okay? So now let's start. So first the Gemara brings this braita, and Rebbe is mitameh, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda is mitaher. I actually didn't read the words of the Gemara where they suggest, so let's read it. My lav, is it not that Rebbe savar mishum avira, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda savar mishum gusha? Is that not the debate here? To which they say, no, that is not the debate. So in this interpretation, everyone's going to say it's actually real impurity they're concerned about. But we have to explain then, why does Rebbe say then you're not impure, right? So if you go in this box, or why does Rebbe say you are impure if you go in the box? because you would say, if you're going in a box and it's really impurity, it actually shouldn't be a problem. It's actually Rebbe that we're more concerned with explaining. Because again, if you go in a box, it should protect you from the impurity. So Rebbe has a unique approach that says Mar Savar. So Mar Savar, the first one is Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. He holds Ohel Zaruk Shmei Ohel. Now, this box, why does the box protect you from impurity? The box protects you from impurity because it in and of itself is like a tent. So basically, you're over the dead body. You're theoretically, if you were, over it physically, you would be what's called ma'ahil. You kind of make a tent over the dead body, and then you're basically bringing the dead body's tumah into you. But if there's an ohel on top, then, and you're in the ohel, that ohel protects you from the impurity. So Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says that a moving tent, because what is this box? We didn't talk about this before, but it's actually moving. It's not like a real tent or a real, right? It's moving, and it's kind of passing over something. So that's like an ohel zahuk. It's like a tent that's being thrown. So a tent that's being thrown is just like a tent. It could still block the tumah just as much as a tent that's stable. That's Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Umar Savar, but Rebbe is going to say, Lo Shmei Ohel. A tent that moves, it's not Ohel. That's it doesn't count. It has to be stable in one place for it to be considered an Ohel. So now, again, let's go back to the chart. So let's explain. So Rebbe, who says it's mitame, is because he thinks that this doesn't count as a tent that should protect you from the impurity because it moves. So you're in this box, someone's carrying you through. Since you're being moved, doesn't count as an Ohel, and that's why you're tannaitic. And Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it is an Ohel. So everyone, according to this, thinks that the issue is the earth and impurity in the earth. And it's just that a debate about this Ohel. V'hatanya, to which the Gemara, again, in my reading right now, again, it's not my reading, but the way we're going to read the sugya is according to half the, some of the commentaries, the main commentaries, is that this Braita now rejects V'hatanya, but wait, according to this, we basically say that Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda holds an ohel that's moving, a tent that's moving, or a box or some sort of structure that's moving, is an ohel, which means it blocks the impurity. But now we're going to see a case where he doesn't say that. He says the opposite. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Tevashi mele'ah kelim. You have a box full of kelim. Instead of a person, you have vessels. Doesn't matter. It's all the same. Uzraka al pnei hamet. And you threw it. This is ohel zaruk, mamash. You threw it over a dead body. I'm going to skip this word ba'ohel for a minute. Tme'ah. It's impure. The vessels inside the box that get thrown over the dead body are impure. What do you see here? An ohel that gets thrown is not an ohel. And yet he says, if it was stable in one place, then it would be Torah. Like let's say let's say it was in one place and it would have to be, it wasn't thrown over the dead body. Let's say it was placed on top of where the dead body was underneath it, right? Or, right, then it would protect it, what was in there. Or, this word ba'ohel, I put in parentheses here because, and I didn't read it before, some people read the word ba'ohel. You would have to read it like this. So go back to the beginning of his words. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says a box that's full of kelim, and it's either thrown on the mate or it's in a tent. Okay, so it would have to be in a tent, but moving within that tent. So there's a dead body in the tent, and you move this box in the tent. Okay, and you don't put it down. And only if you put it down would it be impure. So some people take out the word ba'ohel. Some people just say it's an additional case. It's not you put it on the mate in a tent. That doesn't make any sense. You put it over the dead body, which again, this is what we keep talking about. If I put myself over the dead body or something over the dead body, the tumah goes up and it would be impure. In this case, right, it's in a box, but the box doesn't help it at all. But does the box not help it? Because ohel zaruk is not an ohel. Because a moving ohel is not, and that's what Rebbe says. That's not what Rabbi Yossi. We just said Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says the opposite. And this Braita says Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says exactly what Rebbe said and not what Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda said. This can't possibly work. Okay, so we reject this option. So now we move to option number 3. In other words, why 3? Because again, 1 and 2 were rejected according to our reading. 1 was rejected. We tried to say the whole machloket is avira or gusha. Then we said, no. Everyone agrees it's real tumah, gusha. It's the earth we're worried about and bones in the earth. And it's just a matter of, is a moving tent going to be considered a tent that blocks impurity or not? I don't want you to get confused. There's ohel creates impurity, but also blocks impurity. Okay? It works in opposite ways. In oil, if there's a dead body or a kezayid of a dead body or all those things we saw, kezayid of the liquid, all those things in a tent, it makes everything in the tent impure. That's the regular din of ohel. This is another din of ohel, which means that if within that tent or over a space where there's a dead body, you pass this box that's blocking, right? So basically anything in the box will not become impure. So ohel, it's almost from the same law, really, which is all is considered its own unique space. So if it's that the dead body's in the ohel, it's going to make everything tameh. If it's that there's a box in the space where the dead body is, but in that box, everything there is protected, basically. So that just so you don't get confused by the terminology. Next. Now we're going to suggest option number 3. Ela de kule alma mishum avira. So ela means no. We're rejecting the previous. Okay, by the way, the other version, which thinks that the previous explanation got accepted and understands a little bit differently, has the words ibait ema here, which is alternatively, you could say. Okay, but our version says ela, which means we rejected the last one, but let's explain it differently. De kule alma mishum avira. Everybody thinks the opposite of what we just said, which is everyone thinks it's just a gzera of the rabbis. They didn't want people going outside of Israel. So they said, anywhere you go outside of Israel, you'll become impure, as a way to deter people. So now what's the question? So now if you go into somewhere outside of Israel in a box, some sort of trunk, you will either Rebbe says you'll be impure, Rebbe says you'll be pure. You're not impure. Why would he say that if it's just the airspace? So Mar Saval, Kevan de lo shricha lo gazru be Rabbanan. This is a very famous principle in Gzerot Rabbanan, in rabbinic ordinances. If it's a very uncommon case, the rabbis didn't bother making a gzerah. When the rabbis make an ordinance, they make it for the typical cases. They don't make it for the atypical cases. Now, how many of you ever got carried into a place in a box, right? Or in a trunk? We don't generally carry people in trunks. In boxes, it's not very typical. So in a place, de lo shchicha, where it's not common, the rabbis just didn't make a gzerah. That's Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. Umar Savar and Rebbe said, Afagav de lo shchicha, gazru be Rabbanan. Rebbe said, okay, fine, this might not be the most typical case. Doesn't matter. The rabbis made this ordinance across the board. And Vahatanya, and here we're going to bring a braita to prove it. And this braita is going to clearly follow Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, which is why I put it on his side of the chart. Remember, he says, you're pure. Why are you pure? Because there's no impurity in a very rare case. So now he's going to say the following. If you go in a Shidat Teval Migdal Tahor, matches exactly what we saw, he said, right? But Bikaron ubisfina ubiskalia tameh. But if you go in a carriage type thing, or a boat, or in iskaria, which is according to the Koran, it's a type of raft. They even have a picture of it there. If you have the Koran, you're impure. Why? Because this must be. What's the distinction between going in a box or going in some sort of caravan or boat or raft? Well, that's the typical way that people got around in those days. So the typical way, you're going to be impure, even though you're in presumably the raft is actually open, but even if it's open, it's still got a bottom to it, which the bottom theoretically could block the tumah from, let's say, below. Okay, and if you go in a boat where it presumably could be covered, or in this, carriage, which is a covered space, you're actually going to be impure because, again, the whole issue is the airspace. We don't care about the tumah being blocked. That's not the issue. The issue is, right, is it the airspace? And if you go in an atypical manner, well, we're not going to make the gzerah in that case. If you go in a typical manner, we're actually going to make a gzerah. So it doesn't matter here. The truth is, I started saying about the boat being covered, not covered, tumah. The truth is, it's irrelevant to tumah. I'm sorry I said that. That just confused you. It doesn't have anything to do with tumah. Did you enter in a normal way, right? Did you get there through, nowadays, airplane or boat, or, if you got in through cruise ship, then you would be impure because that's the typical way. If you got in some very strange manner where someone, I don't know, propelled you in some rocket and threw you, flew you in some very strange way, then you wouldn't be impure. So that proves that Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda's whole issue is Is it shchicha or is it not shchicha? Is it common? Is it not common? And if it's not common, atypical, we're not going to make the gzera there. So that's option number 3, which is the first option which gets accepted. Option number 4, ibai dema. Alternatively, you could say, and the Gemara doesn't say these words, but I put it in the chart, that this option is going to say it's actually, they all agree it's mishum gusha. It's actually all agree it's because of impurity, real impurity. And then the question is, why does Rebbe say if you go in this box, is it still a problem? And Rabbi Yehuda says it does. It's not. Because hacha shema yotzi rosho berubo l'sham pligim. The machloket is, are we concerned that if you go in a box, maybe you'll accidentally take out your head and most of your body into chutz la'aretz, okay? Like you might put yourself out of the box. And Rabbi Yossi says, no, we're not worried that you're going to actually accidentally come out of the box. The assumption here, it's an interesting assumption, is that if you got into outside of Israel in this box, it's because you wanted to protect yourself from becoming impure, right? It's obviously atypical. So why would you do it? Because you need to get from somewhere to somewhere. I don't know why. You need to go through there. Let's put you in a place where you're not going to become impure, so we'll keep you in this box. So the question is, are we worried you're going to come out of the box? Now, notice they say Rosho v'Rubo. This, by the way, is why do you need Rosho and Rubo? In real Tameh, you don't need Rosho and Rubo. Just your arm becomes Tameh, you become Tameh. If your arm goes over a grave, let's say, your whole body will become impure. But since this is all rabbinic, because we don't really know this tumah there, it's all just a doubt, maybe there's bones there. So the rabbi said, we're going to basically say that only if the majority of your body, okay, right, your head and the majority of your body are in are on top of the land, then you will become impure. So again, the issue is, are we concerned that you might, and therefore, if you go in the Shidat Yavam, we're already going to say you're impure because we're worried that you might stick most of your body out of this box. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we're not worried about that. And here's the Braita to prove it, that this is what the issue is. Bahatanya, there's a Braita that says, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer. This Braita actually says it's Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. Hanichnas le'eretz hamim b'shidat yavam midal tahor ad sheyotzi l'sham rosho rubo. Here he says you're pure unless you take out most of your body and your head, which basically shows that until you actually do it, he's not concerned that maybe you'll do it. But it makes sense then to say, why was he saying this? To go against Rebbe, who was concerned that maybe, is basically saying, Rebbe says, we're going to make you impure right away because chances are you'll try to come out of that box at some point, right? And you'll take out the majority of your body. And I'm thinking of like people who put their hands out of cars, or I don't know, that's what goes in my head, right? Which we're not usually so worried people are going to do that. But for whatever reason, Rebbe was concerned you would do this. And Rebbe says, no, if you actually do it, of course, we're going to make you impure, but we're not worried that you're going to do this. So there you have your sugya. Let's just do a quick review of it using the chart. So again, first explanation was that this is a machloket tanaim, right? This machloket tanaim, the machloket tanaim is the machloket we've been talking about. Is it mishum avira? Is it mishum gusha? To which the Gemara first rejects by saying, no, it's a machloket about a moving tent. That's their debate, to which we rejected that because Rabbi Yehuda didn't match his words in a different Braita where he appeared. And then we brought two alternative explanations, that either they both think it's mishum avira, just a deterrent to go to outside of Israel, and the machloket was, do we make this gzera in a case that's so rare? Rebbe says, yes, we do. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we don't. And the fourth explanation is it's actually tumah there. And what we're worried about is actual tumah. And the question is, Rebbe says, we're worried that maybe you'll accidentally go out of this box. And Rabbi Yehuda is not concerned about that, only if you actually go out of the box. And again, for each section, we had a Braita that either rejected or proved, right? For the second three options, okay, for the last three options, not for the first. For the first, we just rejected it and then proved it otherwise. Okay, now we're going to move on to the second part of our sugya. And you'll see we're almost at Amud Bet, and Amud Bet is only 6 lines. It's pretty short. Matchil umoneh. So now the Mishnah had said, number one, it doesn't cancel the previous days. Remember all these cases? And you start counting as soon as you finish the purification. So our topic right now is going to be a leper. You're a Nazir and you become a leper. What happens? So again, you have 7 days where you're a leper. You shave at the end of those 7 days. 7 days where you purify yourself from being a leper, and you shave again at the end of those 7 days. Then So all this time, you've stopped counting being a Nazir. And as soon as you finish on day 7, the second day 7, you've shaved, you now continue your count from wherever you were up to. So comes Rav Chisda and he says the following. Lo shanu ela b'nizirut mu'et. This Mishnah is only talking about in a short term of nizirut. Now, what he's talking about is the fact that you have to stop counting your days when you become a leper and only continue counting on day 7. That's the matchil u'moneh miyad. So on day 7 of purification, you continue your count. But you didn't count all the days of Mitzorah or leprosy. Don't count toward your days of Nazirut. Comes from Chisda, and he said that's only true if you're in a short period of Nazirut. Now, generally, short period of Nazirut, how do we define it? 30 days. So if it's a 30-day Nazirut, aval b'Nazirut meruba, let's say you have a 100-day Nazirut. So mislak savid nami salkinle. He says, if it's, Caroline, hold off on your question. It's going to be the Gemara's question, okay? Very good thinking. So now, if you're a Nazir for 100 days, then we're going to continue all the days you're a leper and all the days you're purifying from a leper are going to count as your Nazirut days. What Rav Chisda seems to be saying is, if you only have a 30-day Nazirut, we can't waste any of those days while you're a leper. That's what it sounds like he's saying. But if you have a lot of days, we can overlap them. It's fine because you have a lot of days anyway, and we can overlap. That's what it sounds like he's saying. Mativ Rav Shrevia. So Rav Shrevia comes in and says, wait a minute, what you're saying makes no sense. Okay, and Caroline already mentioned this in the chat, which is number 1. But look what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says you count immediately and it doesn't cancel the previous days. It's not exactly the language of the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Eino soter et hakodmim, umatchilu moneh miyad. But basically he's paraphrasing the Mishnah. And he's saying there's 2 issues, right? Number 1 is you start recounting, which means you've stopped counting. And number 2, you count from wherever you were up to. It doesn't cancel any previous days. But b'mai, what case could this be? Ilema b'nizirut mu'eted, if it's like you said, a 30-day nizirut, habai gidul se'al. It can't possibly be, it doesn't cancel your previous days. Let's say you were a Nazir for 15 days, and then you became a Mitzorah. So, okay, you stop counting. And then when you're done with your leprosy and you've shaved your second time, you now have how many days left according to the Mishnah? 15. Well, that's not possible because you need 30 days in order to have hair growth of 30 days to finish your Nizirut. So you're going to have to add an extra 15 days. So it's not true. It actually does cancel all the previous days because after your Nizirut is over, you're going to need a complete 30 days. So it can't be talking about that. And that's the case Rav Chisda said it was talking about. Now moving to Amud Bet. He says, and I have a further question, which is according to what you're saying. Well, if you say, let's say it's a longer Nizirut, even though he said Nizirut mu'eted, but if you say it's a longer Nizirut, katane matchilu moneh miyad. Now, what did Rav Chisda say? Rav Chisda said if it's Nizirut merubah, what are you going to do? You're going to count the leprosy days as part of your count, right? So if you were a Nazir for 100 days and on day 30 you became a leper, you continue those 14 days where you're a leper and then you shave and then you purify yourself and you shave. Those 14 days all count. So when you're done with your Nizirut, you're now up to day, what did I say, 30, day 30. So now you're up to day 44. Okay, you're 14 days later and you continue your count. Well, if you say the Mishnah, that's what Rav Chisda said you would do in Nizirut merubah. Well, that doesn't matter. Then you can't. So the Mishnah didn't work for a Nizirut mu'eted, a 30-day period. It also doesn't work for Nizirut merubah, according to Rav Chisda, because katane matchilu moneh miyad. The Mishnah says you restart your count at the end of the purification process. Well, according to what Rav Chisda said, no, you never stopped your count, so you don't restart it. Matchilu moneh miyad means only from now that you've become purified. So we basically have an issue. According to Rav Chisda, the words matchilu moneh miyad don't make sense according to the way he explained Nizirut merubah, because you don't ever stop your count according to him. And the words eino soter et hakodmim don't apply to Nizirut mu'eted. Right? There's 2 things in the Mishnah that seem to work together, but according to Rav Chisda, they don't work in either, right? Either those words don't work there or those words don't work there. Because in a 30-day Nizirut, whatever day you became purified, you would have to start 30 days from there. So it would cancel your previous days. So we really, according to Rav Chisda, there's no way to explain the Mishnah. Right? The simple way to explain the Mishnah would basically be, without Rav Chisda, would be that it's talking about a longer than 30-day period where you basically are going to need 30 days of hair growth, right? And you're gonna basically stop your Nazirut, pause it right here, right? And then continue. And as long as you still have 30 days, you'll continue from where you stopped. But Rav Chisda says, no, in Nazirut Merubah, you don't do that. You actually continue to count all the days of your purification. So you don't start from scratch. So I'm sorry, you don't pause it at all. And that's not what the Mishnah says. So we're really stuck. We don't have a good way to explain the Mishnah. But hu motivla v'hu mefari. Rav Shrevia says, Rav Shrevia himself, even though he asked the question, hu motivla v'hu mefari means he asked the question and he resolved the question himself. Okay, so here I made a little timeline on the sheet to show you. So I'm sharing my screen. This is the case where it would work. B'nizirut bat 50 yom. It would be a case where you were a Nazir for 50 days. So on day 1, you became a Nazir. And then diyativ esrim, you were a Nazir for 20 days. On day 20, you became mitzora, nitztareya. Okay, you became a mitzora. Right, so diyativ esrim, you sat for 20 days. V'idyalida beit sarad. Okay, according to the words of Gemara, you basically became a leper. Now, what happens? In this case, think about it. If you continue to count, like what did Rav Chisda say in Nazirut Merubah? You would think this was Nazirut Merubah, right? A long Nazirut, because it's 50 days. So you would continue to count. But if you continue to count from day 20 and your leprosy days count, you're going to end your purification process on day 34, and you're not going to have 30 days left of hair growth. So basically, in this case, because what basically this means, it doesn't have to be a 50-day Nazirut. It's any Nazirut that has exactly 30 days left, because then you won't have to go back. You won't have to recount any days because you have exactly 30 days left, but you also can't count your leprosy days as days of Nazir because you need 30 days at the end. So Megalech Tzara'ato, right? You shave for your tzarat at the end of the 14 days. And then you're left with exactly 30 days. And this is the exact case. Again, it could be a 50-day. It could be 40 days where you became a Nazir, where you became a leper on day 10. It doesn't have to be exactly 50, but 50 is the example where you're going to basically end up with exactly, right, 30 days left from the day you became a leper. So in that case, both laws of the Mishnah will work according to Rav Chisda. Number 1, you won't have to cancel any previous days because you have exactly 30 days when you're done, but you also don't count these days as days of Nazir, because if you do, you won't have 30 days left at the end. So you're going to stop, pause, wait till you're finished with your purification process, and then continue. So basically, when he says Nazirut mu'etet, what he really means is, yes, he means 30 days, but not that you took on Nazirut of 30 days. It's that you have exactly 30 days left from the day you became a leper. That's what he's referring to. Again, this is Rav Shrevia's explanation to explain Rav Chisda that didn't really make sense. We're going to stop here for today because the next line, it's one more line, and it's really just beginning a whole new section. And it's within the same section, but it's now going to be Rami Barhama's question on Rav Chisda. But we're going to, if I read these next few words, we won't get anywhere. So we'll leave it for tomorrow. The 2 things we did in today's daf, in terms of the structure, it was very simple. We took this machloket about someone who goes into Eretz Hamim in a box, some sort of trunk, and we saw there was a machloket tanaim. We thought maybe this is exactly the machloket tanaim of Gusha or Avira, and then we rejected it by bringing various explanations to that machloket. Again, first one was rejected, but the other 2 were accepted. Then as possibilities anyway. And then one says they all agree Gusha, one says they all agree Avira, and then we're left with not really knowing what the answer is, which reason it is. We're left with both as possibilities. But it's not a debate between Tanaim here, or not necessarily. Then we brought Rav Chisda's explanation of our Mishnah in the case of a leper. His unique explanation is not the way we explained the Mishnah originally. We thought all these cases, you don't count these days as days of Nazirut. And he said, only if it's a short term, but if it's a long term, then it would actually, you would continue counting, you wouldn't stop. Which Rav Shrevia said, well, then the Mishnah makes no sense. There's no way the Mishnah would hold, where you could actually have a case that the Mishnah says, where both those things happen, where both you pause it and restart after, and you don't have to add any extra days, to which we found a unique case where you have exactly 30 days left from the day you became a leper till the end, and then Rav Chisda could have a case where the Mishnah actually holds. As I said, we're going to continue with questions on Rav Chisda into tomorrow's daf. Wishing everybody a Shabbat Tov. See you tomorrow.